They found the first eye on a paintbrush. It was gouged cleanly from its socket, dangling on the frayed end of a soaked sable brush, trembling ever so slightly under the humming fluorescence of Studio 9A. The smell of turpentine and something far more ancient, something wet and burning, hung thick in the air. The other professors wouldn't speak about it, not even to each other. One of them tried. 2 days later, they found his hands fused to a canvas, screaming in oil, his mouth a permanent smear of crimson. Professor Elaine Walcott had always kept late hours, claiming that art lived in the silence after midnight. But now, midnight had turned against her. Her once vibrant studio was a graveyard of unfinished portraits, eyes scratched out, faces peeled back into monstrous symmetries, brushstrokes that curved in impossible angles. She had started painting with her left hand, despite being dominantly right-handed. That was the first sign. The second was the whispering. It came from the walls, from the stretched canvases, from the cracks beneath the wood floor. Voices in languages she'd never heard but somehow understood. They promised inspiration, then they demanded it. Elaine stumbled backward, paint-streaked and trembling, as her latest piece shifted on the easel. Not visually, it moved. The canvas breathed. Thick oil bubbled on its surface like boiling tar. She dropped her palette and ran her fingers along the edges, desperate to find a seam, a tear, anything to prove it was just a trick of exhaustion. A hand reached out of it. It was pale, feminine, wrong in all the ways only the eyes noticed but the mind refused to accept. Fingers tipped in glistening charcoal claws wrapped around Elaine's wrist. The canvas flexed open like a wound, revealing a world where flesh hung like drapes and skies bled red. She screamed, but it was swallowed. All they found in the morning was a smear of red on the studio floor and her final painting, an empty chair in a room that stretched forever. The windows in the piece showed no light, only black flame flickering behind cracked glass. They canceled the remaining classes that week. They hushed the news. They scrubbed the story from the student newspaper. A substitute was announced 3 days later. Her name was Professor Camille Vale. Young, soft-spoken, always cold to the touch. She never blinked during lectures. And every assignment she gave required a lot of red paint. The first time Ava noticed the red door, it was barely open. No one else seemed to see it. It sat at the far end of the art building's lowest floor, sunken 2 levels below ground, where the lights flickered too often and the pipes overhead hissed like dying animals. The hallway reeked of varnish and mildew. The door was matte red, bruised and peeling, with no signage. A slow creak echoed from it as Ava passed, and she thought only for a moment she heard someone whisper her name. She didn't stop walking. Ava Ellison had just turned 19. The bruises of high school still clung to her like a second skin. Awkward silences, the sharpness of being unseen. College was supposed to be a fresh canvas, a new beginning. But Raven Ridge College didn't feel like a beginning. It felt like something old pretending to be new. Everything about the campus was too quiet. The buildings loomed too close together. The sky never looked fully blue, even when it was cloudless. And the art building, the one place she thought would feel like home, smelled like decay beneath the layers of paint. Still, she smiled when she entered Studio 7C, her first real college art class. 4 rows of easels formed a ring, and in the center stood a pale woman in all black, her long auburn hair tied into a perfect braid that coiled down her spine like a serpent. Her skin was smooth, flawless, but tight, like something that had been preserved, not born. "Welcome," she said without turning. Her voice was hushed but carried like thunder. "Let's create something eternal." Ava took a seat beside 3 other students who looked just as nervous as she felt. Jonas with shadowed eyes and charcoal-smudged fingers. Delilah always sketching in the margins of her sleeves. Lucas quiet but with a crooked smile that lingered too long. They didn't speak at first, but something about the room, the smell, the silence, the way the professor's eyes never quite met theirs, made them cling to each other without question. Art, Professor Vale said, walking the circle, is a sacrifice. You must give something of yourself to gain anything worth keeping. No syllabus, no grading policy, just brushes, canvas, and that single phrase. That night, Ava's dreams were filled with images she couldn't explain. She saw a woman with her own face walking into the red door. Behind it, everything bled. A sky of melted eyes, a forest of faceless statues, all whispering her name in unison. When she woke, her fingernails were stained with red. The assignment was written in red ink, not printed, not typed. It looked handwritten, every letter precise, too clean, as if drawn with a blade rather than a pen. Paint what you see when you close your eyes and feel something watching you. No due date, no critique guidelines, no instruction, just a quiet hum through the studio's vents and the way Professor Vale watched each student as if memorizing their movements. Her expression never changed, calm, cold, fixed like a portrait. Ava sat before the blank canvas for hours. She hadn't even unpacked her paints. Her mind was loud, too loud, but every time she tried to shape the chaos into color, her hand froze. She kept thinking of the red door, the silence behind it, the moment it whispered her name. Jonas, seated beside her, had already begun. His piece was smeared in smudges of black and sickly green. A vague silhouette took form, something tall and bent, with too many fingers and no face. "You okay?" he whispered, his first words to her. Ava nodded. She lied. Across the room, Delilah's hands trembled as she dipped a brush into thick scarlet. She didn't speak either, but her eyes darted like something was behind her. She kept glancing at the studio door as though it might vanish. Lucas, always calm, painted something beautiful, serene even, a boy standing alone in a field surrounded by fog. But the boy's feet were missing, melted into the earth. Vale walked behind each student. When she stopped at Ava's easel, still blank, she placed a single hand on her shoulder. Her skin was cold, her nails too long. She whispered, "You just haven't bled yet." Ava turned to ask what she meant, but Professor Vale was already gone. That night, Ava painted. She didn't remember walking to her desk, didn't remember picking up the brush, but by morning her canvas was filled with something jagged and wrong, a tunnel made of eyes. A woman's silhouette in the center, arms raised, screaming silently as a wave of black flame poured toward her from a door-shaped void. Ava wept. She didn't know why. When she brought it to class the next day, Professor Vale didn't speak. She only stared, then smiled, her teeth far too small and far too many. The disappearances began that weekend. A janitor in the art wing never made it home. A philosophy professor left their office mid-sentence and was never seen again. 2 security guards quit. One of them scratched their eyes out before being restrained, screaming that the paintings are breathing, the paintings are watching. No one blamed the art class. No one ever mentioned Studio 9A, even though its lights flickered at all hours. The second assignment was never given aloud. One morning, the 4 of them arrived at Studio 7C to find new canvases waiting for them, untouched, each with a small envelope clipped to the top. No name, just red wax stamps pressed with a strange symbol, a hand with 2 eyes in its palm, one weeping black. Ava's letter simply said, "Paint the first place you died." She stared at it for a long time, not confused, just cold. She'd seen that place before, in dreams, in flickers between blinks, a spiraled staircase descending into a room that should not exist, walls made of moving bodies frozen in paint, and a whispering voice coming from beneath the floor. She didn't tell the others, but she saw the way Jonas froze, reading his, how Delilah's hands shook worse than ever, how Lucas suddenly looked at all 3 of them like he recognized them. Something began to uncoil between the 4 of them. It started small. Jonas asked Ava if she remembered a summer camp near Lake Emery. She didn't, until she did. Delilah mentioned a man in a black hat who used to stand at the edge of her childhood nightmares. Lucas remembered a fire. The others remembered screams, bits of memory, bleeding back into place. They'd met before, not here, not even in this lifetime. But somewhere else, somewhere painted in blood and ash. And all of it was tied to Camille Vale. The art room changed after that. The walls shifted slightly when no one looked. The corners stretched deeper than they should. Paintings began appearing on their own, slabs of wood and canvas nailed into the walls overnight, filled with blurry scenes that none of them remembered painting, but each of them recognized. Delilah found one that looked like her childhood bedroom, but all the windows were sealed with hands. Jonas saw a painting of a bridge he tried to jump from once, but in the painting, someone caught him, a shadow. Lucas showed a mirror reflecting a version of himself with no mouth. Ava showed the red door, wide open, her standing in front of it, holding something in her hand. It was a brush, made of bone. One night, they stayed late in the studio. The lights above flickered, longer than usual, and they all turned to the corner at the same time. Something was watching them, something that shouldn't have eyes but had hundreds, spinning slowly on a slick canvas nailed to the farthest wall. They didn't run, they didn't scream, they only stood together as if remembering something they'd once survived, barely. In the following days, sleep unraveled. None of them could stay awake for long, but none of them truly slept either. They dreamed together, shared hallucinations where Camille Vale stood between flame and shadow, offering them brushes, knives, keys made of bone. And every time they woke up, their paintings had changed. It began with Lucas sleepwalking. At first, he thought it was a dream. Bare feet on cold tile, his dorm door opening without a sound, the fog outside thick like paint water. But when he woke with red footprints trailing back from the stairwell of the east wing, his throat raw from screaming, he realized he had walked somewhere real, and something had followed him back. That morning, none of them spoke in class, but they all noticed the same thing. A new door had appeared in the back of Studio 7C. It hadn't been there the day before, or the day before that, but now, between a storage cabinet and a half-cracked sink, a narrow wooden door stood wedged into the brick, untouched, unpainted, with a knob made of rusted iron and a carving above it. Those who remember what was taken may enter. Jonas reached for it first. His hand passed through the knob, like water rippling through an oil painting. Delilah followed. Lucas hesitated. Ava didn't. She had seen this door before, in her dreams, in her first painting. The hallway inside was impossibly long, longer than the dimensions of the building. The light dimmed with every step. Walls narrowed. The air thickened with the scent of varnish, burning hair, and rotting canvas. At the end stood a room buried in shadow, lit only by the glow of flame, not real fire, but flickers from hundreds of paintings, each glowing faintly, each of someone's face twisted in terror, some weeping, some screaming, some staring blankly as if accepting what had happened to them. Delilah stepped forward, trembling. Her hand brushed one of the frames. Her eyes rolled back. She dropped to her knees, and when Ava grabbed her, she saw it too. Delilah's past life, a town in ash, a school burning, a teacher standing in a sea of crimson, holding a palette of flesh, children's faces on canvas, and Camille Vale, unchanged, painting with both hands, her twin behind her, whispering, "Burn the gate, bleed the world." Ava yanked them back. Lucas pulled Delilah into his arms. Jonas stared at one portrait, one that looked exactly like him, hanging, lifeless, mouth open, brush still in hand. And beneath the flickering frames, they found something else. A journal. Bound in stitched leather, full of dates that made no sense, entries going back centuries. It was written by someone who had taken the class before, someone who had escaped or thought they had. The final page read, "They feed through creation. Every canvas is a doorway, every drop of paint a scream. The more we make, the more they tear through. The teacher isn't one being, she's two, and they are looking for 4 souls, always 4, always reborn, and we are them." As they turned to leave the hidden studio, the door vanished behind them. Studio 7C was empty. The walls were blank. The red door at the far end of the hall was now wide open. Ava woke to paint under her fingernails again. This time it was wet. Her sheets were streaked with crimson and gray, the air thick with the metallic tang of turpentine and something decrepit. Her canvas sat across the room, covered yet dripping, slowly, as if it were bleeding from behind the cloth. And on her floor, drawn in long, careful strokes, a perfect circle, a single word in the center, sever. She wasn't alone. She heard breathing, slow and damp, coming from the corner of her room. But when she turned the light on, nothing was there. Just a single brush, still wet, still moving. At school, the storm began. Studio 7C had been locked from the outside. Chains on the doors, no notice, no explanation. Students passed it without looking, as if their minds couldn't register it anymore. The 4 of them met anyway, in an abandoned sculpture room lit by dying fluorescents, surrounded by broken busts and overturned tables. Jonas didn't speak much anymore. He just stared at the paintings they'd taken from the hidden studio, ones they now kept hidden under Lucas's dorm bed. He said they whispered when no one looked. Delilah was shaking, tracing a symbol into the wall over and over. The hand with 2 weeping eyes. Her own eyes had changed, subtly, too dark, too still, as if something else were looking through them. Lucas said he hadn't slept in 4 days, but he knew the name now. Camille Vale has a twin. She's still alive. She was never born. She was split. Not 2 people, 2 reflections, 2 halves of something ancient and damned. One taught them, the other watched them sleep. They decided to return to the underground studio, but it was gone. Not just the door, the entire hallway had been bricked over like it had never existed. Only one thing remained. The painting on the wall, a new one. Of the 4 of them, holding hands, facing the red door. The door was open, and something on the other side was beginning to crawl through. That night, all 4 of them shared the same dream. They were children again, standing at an easel. The teacher's voice, not Camille's but something deeper, told them to paint what they feared, and they did, each of them. But the paper wasn't paper. It was skin, and when they finished, they saw what they had done, what they'd created. A gate. A living wound in the world. One the twin demons could crawl through. And in the dream, Camille Vale and her double stood side by side, one holding a brush, the other a knife. They smiled, then said together, "Only 4 can open it. Only 1 can close it. But none will leave." Ava woke screaming, her lips stained with black paint. She wasn't alone. All 4 of them had dreamt the same dream, and in the corner of each of their dorms, sometime in the night, a canvas had appeared. The same canvas. The same message, painted in thick black strokes. The final work is coming. Choose who will finish it. The final project arrived without warning. Each of them received a black envelope slipped under their doors during the night. Inside, a folded, brittle piece of vellum, old, cracked, and damp with something sticky. Each note was identical, handwritten in ink that shimmered red when tilted. "Your final work will be painted in the room between worlds. 1 must stay, 3 must choose. The last brushstroke ends the veil and begins the flood." No signature, no instructions, but they all knew what it meant. The hidden studio was back. Lucas found it first. His dorm closet stretched deeper than it should have. Behind a row of jackets and dusty shelves, a spiral stairwell now wound downward, cold, damp, lit by soft red glow, like embers beneath skin. He called the others. When they arrived, they descended together. The staircase ended in a black marble hall, impossible in length, where mirrors lined the walls on both sides. But the mirrors didn't show their reflections. They showed them as children, clutching brushes, covered in red coagulative crimson fluid, standing in front of an enormous unfinished canvas. Behind them, Camille Vale's twin towered, her face obscured by shadows. Her hands rested on each of their shoulders. They were not students, not in that life. They were chosen children centuries ago to serve as vessels for the art that would burn the world open. In the final room, the truth waited. A cathedral of wrought and paint, floors slick with ancient varnish, hundreds of completed portraits nailed to the walls, none of them familiar, but all of them screaming. At the center stood one unfinished canvas, stretched 20 feet wide, its surface alive, shifting, moving, breathing. It showed the world, their world, cracked in the middle, the sky split, the ground warped, the veil torn open. A brush lay on a pedestal before it, still dripping. Above the pedestal, 2 figures painted in brutal, chaotic strokes, Camille and her twin, merging. Delilah wept. Jonas backed away. Lucas whispered, "This is what we were made for." But Ava stepped forward. She remembered it all now, the town that burned, the deal struck to save it, their rebirth, bound to this demon pair as a cycle, a ritual, a cursed resurrection to bring their final masterpiece to life. Every generation, 4 children are born again, their souls reclaimed, their hands made to paint the gate open, their minds split between what is real and what the twins demand. And now the final stroke neared. On the far wall, a new canvas bled into shape. This one showed the 4 of them standing in a circle, one holding the brush, the others standing behind, faces shadowed, unfinished. Only one could stay. Only one could complete the masterpiece. the others would forget, erased, reborn, lost to another cycle. Unless the cycle is broken. Ending one, the final brush stroke. One stays, 3 forget, 1 remembers everything. Ava stared at the canvas. The air around her pulsed, hot and metallic, as if the world itself was a wound trying not to bleed. Lucas stepped forward first. "I'll do it," he whispered, barely audible. "If one of us has to stay, if it ends this." But the brush didn't move for him. It recoiled like a living thing rejecting his hand. Delilah tried next. Her trembling fingers brushed the handle, but the moment she touched it, she convulsed, screamed, her eyes rolled back, and a whisper echoed through the chamber. "Not the broken one." Jonas simply stepped away. He looked at Ava with a strange expression, one of resignation, as if he already knew what would happen. And Ava. She didn't choose. The brush chose her. The moment her hand wrapped around it, the entire chamber went still. The portrait stopped screaming. The canvas before her breathed, and she saw it all. Every cycle they had lived. Every time they had been reborn. Every life they had lost. Every time she had been the one chosen. This wasn't the first ending, it was the 1,000th. She was always the one to finish it. The final stroke cut deep, a line of black from corner to corner, through the sky on the canvas, through the world, through time itself. The veil closed. The twins screamed, horribly, inhumanly, and their forms fractured, oil and ash splattering the floor as their souls were banished back to whatever realm birthed them. And just like that, it was over. Ava opened her eyes to daylight, a dorm room, birds, a normal day, but she was alone. Lucas, Delilah, Jonas, gone, not dead. Erased. She passed them in the halls of campus sometimes. They didn't know her. They laughed with others. They lived free. She remembered everything, and every night she painted, because the final brushstroke had ended this cycle. But the brush still dripped. Ending 2, the canvas tears itself open. No one paints. The art paints itself, and the world begins to bleed. Jonas stood before the brush and kicked it over. "No," he said. Delilah begged him to stop. Lucas backed away, shaking. Ava reached out, but something inside her, something older, made her hesitate. The brush rolled across the floor, still dripping black, still alive. The canvas began to shudder, not metaphorically, physically. The paint on it crawled like ants under skin, swelling, cracking, peeling. A howl split the air, one not of rage, but of laughter. They had waited too long, and the painting. It finished itself. The final stroke drew itself across the canvas like a vein bursting. The image within twisted, opened, and split. The surface of the painting became a tear in the world, a bleeding gash of red and shadow stretching outward into the air. The studio shook, the walls melted, the marble floor liquefied into tar and bone. From the canvas they stepped out. Camille Vale and her twin merged, towering, unseen. Brush in one hand, blade in the other. They didn't speak. They simply began to paint the world. The 4 students ran. But the campus was already gone, replaced by smears of color and screams. Buildings peeled like canvas. Trees bled from their roots. The sky turned to paper and tore. Reality collapsed into surreal horror. The world became a museum of torment, each corner a new masterpiece of suffering, and in the distance a giant figure loomed, painting faster, darker, deeper. No escape. No veil. Just art. Forever.